I have total liberty to change, a creative liberty to change anything to make it work better in English. Any joke, any pun. If I really can't make the pun work in this panel, I add another joke in the later panel. You know, or I mean, it's really, the publisher just wants it to work, and it's really more about the spirit rather than the letter of the original. There are a lot, and then there are the technical, the sort of lesser technical challenges. Like subtitling, you have to fit, the text has to fit in the balloon. You can enlarge the balloon, the speech balloon, but you never want to make it too big to block out the art. You can never shrink it because there's no art behind it. And I mean, and by and large, I find that since I work with slang, especially in the 3 bi-monthly series, which are really just flat-out comic books. I mean, floppy old comic books. There's a like sort of rule of thumb that French is 15% shorter. I mean, English is 15% shorter than French, but it's really not true with slang because slang is a compression of expression already. So that, I mean, when you're working down to the letter, the level of, am I going to be able to fit one more word in this balloon? It becomes more of a, you do wind up negotiating with designers to an extent.
Yeah. But it's true, isn't it? Slang changes very rapidly in comparison to other more normativized. Do you have trouble keeping up with changing slang in French? Is there an urbandictionary.com French?
Well, you know, I don't have to deal with up-to-the-minute slang. It's more, the slang I deal with, it probably sounds more like movie slang than slang in something like a novel like Keep Demain or something, it's not, I don't, but one thing I do wind up reading a lot of comics for is changing over sound effects, because all the, all the sound effects in French are generally not acceptable in English, at least not the way they're spelled, and so that winds up taking it, and also you wind up working with the images. I mean, there's one specific one I can recall off the top of my head where, in the French, it was something. Well, these two would-be alien conquerors land on a planet where the inhabitants take their every command completely literally. And so every time they say something that has some figurative expression in it, it gets misinterpreted comically. And there's this one frame where they tell the aliens that they're really going to rough them up, and the French colloquial expression has something, has the verb to drool in it, and so there's a panel where all the little alien natives are standing around with some sort of liquid coming out of their mouths, but you can't really say, you can't. So we wind up going with, I'm going to beat the puke out of you, and it still stayed the same because of the visual. You could. It's all. There's Anthea Bell, who did all the Asterix and Obelix translations. It was a really amazing, detailed pun work, sort of and she has this article about it on the at literaryytranslation.com, the British Council's site. And it's really illuminating because she talks about name changes, which is another thing I have to do a lot, and also how she always felt she could translate doggerel perfectly well, but she couldn't. She would never try real poetry, and that's kind of how I feel about the comics I do. I have as long as I keep it light and merry, then it's true somehow.
You also had another strange thing come about, which I think I have this right, that during the writer's strike, you, for the Weinstein brothers, translated a reboot of the Hellraiser series?
Yeah, that was, I first, well, because I first worked with the Weinstein Company because I'd taken over a book that Linda Coverdale had been working on, but for personal reasons couldn't finish at the time, and so somehow I stayed on their radar, and when they needed this screenplay, it was actually the second screenplay I did for them. The first one was based on a long-standing French comic book action series called Lago Winch about a millionaire playboy. But this one, so the Hellraiser, I guess, I don't know the details of what happened, but during the strike they must have looked to, they found this foreign team who had made, a Spaniard and a Frenchman, who had made some sort of successful horror film in France, and they had an idea, and I guess Clive Barker's blessing, which to reboot the Hellraiser series, and they wrote several drafts of scripts, which I translated in quick succession. And usually I was doing these, late at night without having read them, and it would be, it was really sort of a nauseating experience because you'd be going on and then all of a sudden you'd realize that you'd been describing, something really gory for several pages, and like just details of how someone had been mangled by a train, or like demons having sex with multiple amputees, and Hellraiser. If you've seen Hellraiser, it all fits together.
But you translated screenplays as well, right?
I did several. A long time ago. This was, in the, I guess, the mid-'80s, when I collaborated for a bit with a Catalan film director who mainly worked with children's animated and children's stories, and then one long, like a 3-hour television. What was it, a screenplay based on a late 19th century woman writer and manufacturer. It was very interesting.
I want to open up to questions from the audience, but first I want to say 2 quick things. One is that Marian's going to be speaking here in the same room tomorrow at 4 o'clock about retranslations of Tolstoy for Dan's class. And also she'll be reading from her own translations at Muddy Waters Cafe over on Goodman Street at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And the other thing I wanted to say is that it's kind of ironic, coincidental, perfect that we're having this today, this panel discussion today, because last night, or I guess this morning, there is a big article in the Associated Press and all over about the Swedish Academy's permanent secretary, Horace Engdahl, talking about Americans in relation to the Nobel Prize for Literature. And this is his exact quote. Of course, there are still powerful literatures in all big cultures, but you can't get away from the fact that Europe is still the center of the literary world, not the United States. He said the U.S. is too isolated, too insular. They don't translate enough and don't really participate in the big dialogue of literature. Their ignorance is restraining, sort of implying that Americans do not deserve the Nobel Prize, which is this probably wasn't a great thing for him to say. There's a lot of things that are an issue there, but it's still interesting for someone to point out how isolated and insular we are. And all of you help kind of break through those walls by bringing more literature to American readers, which you all deserve. Yeah, and you guys deserve big praise for that. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that because I didn't want to get off onto all the crazy discussions you could have in relation to his statements. But I did think it was interesting and a nice coincidence. Does anyone have any questions for?
I have a question to all of you. Whether you have read translations of your current favorite author into non-English languages, and if so, which of the other languages that the author has been translated into are the most suitable, or lend themselves best, or are the most readable?
I've never done.
There's a book, it's pretty forgotten now, but it was big in the 70s when it came out, called 92 in the Shade by Thomas McQuain. And it is, in my own reading development, probably what it occupies that place that On the Road probably occupies for most other people. And I made sure to read the French translation of that because it seemed such. McQuain has a sort of yarny voice that uses a lot of American colloquialisms, but sort of serves them up with a really ironic twist. It's very colorful language, and I was surprised at how much this sort of cowboy ranginess was preserved in French. But that's just the one isolated example.
I'm actually checking the translation to Japanese of Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon right now as a sort of fun thing to do. And this won't really answer the question of how. I'm not really sure that I believe there ever would be a good answer to does a language match well with an author or something like that, because what the translator tries to do, right, is to make it match, and they'll try everything, and there are always going to be people who will come up with something.
Well, let me respond to that. When I was studying Russian literature,